Bogdan Bogdanovic is so underrated. Let's get into this. Bogdan Bogdanovic was drafted with a 27th overall pick in the 2014 NBA draft to the Phoenix Suns and then was traded on draft night to the Sacramento Kings. But similar to a lot of other European players, Bogdanovic didn't end up coming over to the NBA until the 2017 NBA season. In Bogdanovic's rookie season, he showed flashes, but he didn't show anything crazy as of yet. He showed his ability to shoot the ball, which was his main talent coming into the NBA. But after his first season finished up with the Sacramento Kings, they knew they definitely had a very good rotational piece at the very least with this guy. But as the seasons progressed for Bogdanovic, you could see that he was getting better in every single season, and his efficiency numbers were getting better every single season. And that's exactly what you want to see from a young guy potentially getting better each and every season and becoming a real NBA player and a real NBA starter in the league and maybe a little bit better. But as the seasons progressed and Bogdanovic went from a guy who was just trying to fit in and prove that he was able to play in the NBA to the point where he was definitely a very good NBA player and an above average player and even a starting level player, Bogdanovic soon became annoyed with the Sacramento Kings organization and wanted to change teams in the offseason. It was a little bit of a weird situation because apparently it's a sign and trade where he's going to the Milwaukee Bucks, but he never even knew he was going there, so it was a little strange, but he ended up signing with the Atlanta Hawks that offseason. And I think this Hawks team is a perfect team for him to really flourish because they have shooters all around him, with Trae Young obviously distributing the ball effectively to all his open shooters, and I think he's getting a great opportunity to show what he could really do with this Hawks team, and I think he's been showing it this season. In Bogdanovic's third season with the Sacramento Kings, it was already to a point where people knew this guy was a legit NBA player in this league and a really good young player, but I don't think people knew that he was this good as we've been seeing this season with him on the Atlanta Hawks, and especially in the playoffs. He's been playing insanely well. When you're playing with a guy like Trae Young, he makes every player on your team better, especially the center like Clint Capella in the pick and roll with the lobs. But when you're talking about a guy like Bogdanovic, where he's just a three-point shooter, he can do more than that, but his main ability is three-point shooting, and he's so efficient from there even when he's contested. Having a guy like Trae Young is going to make it so much easier for you, and that's why I think it's literally the perfect situation for Bogdanovic with the Atlanta Hawks. But I still think even at this point, a lot of people underrate what Bogdanovic could do in this league, and I think he's a lot better than what people think. I think people think this guy's only a three-point shooter and that's all he can do, and that's not the case. But let's take his game point by point to see why I really think this guy is so good and so underrated in this league. So of course the first thing you think of when you think of Bogdanovic is his three-point ability and his three-point shooting, which is definitely justified. When you see this guy, he's hitting wide open threes very consistently. He's hitting contested threes very consistently. Some of the three-pointers this guy hits is just absolutely nuts. Fading away corner three-pointers, just crazy. Bogdanovic doesn't necessarily have crazy range where he's able to shoot from half court consistently, but he's just a guy who's a very good contested shot shooter. And when you talk about for Trae Young, his sake, when you're able to kick out to a guy, even if he's contested and able to hit those shots, that helps you out tremendously as well. And this might be a little controversial, but I think arguably Bogdanovic is the best shooter they have on the Atlanta Hawks team. Trae Young is maybe a better three-point shooter in terms of his ability, but in terms of percentage, it's not really that close. Bogdanovic is definitely better because Trae Young sometimes he tends to chuck up shots from near half court a lot of the times, when obviously that's not a great shot, where Bogdanovic is just consistently hitting those corner three-point shots and just three-point shots from the wing, and it's just in general. Bogdanovic is definitely a great shooter in this league, and I personally think he's one of the best shooters in the league when you look at his percentage and just the shots that he's taking and making. But if a catch-and-shoot guy was all Bogdanovic was, I don't necessarily think he'd be that underrated. But on the offensive end, Bogdanovic could definitely do way more than just catch and shoot. In the playoffs especially, he's proven the ability to drive all the way to the basket and finish with crafty layups around the basket, or even kick out to wide open shooters, because as I mentioned before, the Atlanta Hawks literally have all shooters around them, which obviously helps him out tremendously as well in terms of his assist numbers, and I think it can be a little inflated when you have guys like that all around your team. But either way, I think he has a decent ability to play make in this league for his position and what he does. And also, as I mentioned, I think he has above average handling ability to get all the way to the basket, and he has decent quickness to get by players along with his handling as well, obviously. And he also has that great pull-up mid-range shot that he has, and also he can go all the way to the basket, as I mentioned before. I think offensively, when you have that shot that he does and he's so effective with it, it really makes a defender stay up to you a lot closer and makes it easier for you to get by him with less athleticism needed and less quickness needed, and also his handling doesn't need to be as good as it would need to be normally when you have that great of a jump shot. And also, not to mention, Bogdanovic is still very young in this league, so I think going forward he's just going to get better. And when you talk about he has a player on his team like Trae Young that's going to get him wide open easy shots, I think this Atlanta Hawks team is the absolute perfect situation for for him. And when you look around this Atlanta Hawks team, you can see all young and ascending players on this team, so you would think all those players are also going to get better as the years go on. And when you're playing around better players, of course, it just makes it easier on yourself. So that's why I think Bogdanovic is going to continuously get better throughout his career. But one stigma about European players that's slowly going away, but one stigma is that's still kind of here, is that European players are soft and they're not really able to play great defense. But the thing about Bogdanovic, he's definitely very underrated in this regard. But I think Bogdanovic is actually a pretty good defender in this league as well, as you've been seeing, especially in these playoffs. Bogdanovic on the defensive end, when he's guarding perimeter players, he moves his feet pretty well to stay in front of guys, and those are the guys that he's guarding most of the time, so that's very important for a guy like him in his position. But also another thing on the defensive end that he does that you may not think when you're just looking at him and looking at the position that he plays, is he's actually a pretty decent post defender as well, especially in these playoffs against the Sixers. I've seen him do a really good job on a guy like Ben Simmons, who's typically in the post even though he's technically a point guard, but he does most of his work from the high post and just posts up and puts up hook shots. But I thought when Bogdanovic was on him, he's actually doing pretty good defensively on him. So when you look at Bogdanovic as a whole, obviously he's a great shooter. He can get to the basket. He can basically do everything on the offensive end. He also has that post turnaround fadeaway a little bit, which I think he's somewhat working on, so hopefully he can get better at that and really perfect that as his career goes on, and that's a very effective shot, as I mentioned a lot in my videos. But on the offensive end, he can basically do everything there, even pass a little bit. And then also on the defensive end, he's not a liability like a lot of people may think. He's actually a pretty above average defender. So when you look at Bogdanovic, he's definitely a young and ascending player, and right now I think he's definitely at a point where he's an above average offensive player and starter, I should mention, and he could be a guy who comes off the bench as a sixth man and just puts absolute buckets. But I think he's one of those guys similar to Lou Williams and Manu Ginobili when he was playing. He's one of those guys who could play in that six-man role, but he's definitely an above-average starter if you were to play him there as well. And that's exactly what he's playing right now. He's a starter right now for the Atlanta Hawks, and he's playing a good amount of minutes, and he's providing for them very effectively. And that's a huge reason why I think the Hawks are actually tied 2-2 now against the Sixers, when a lot of people had the Sixers as a heavy favorites coming into this series. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Bogey is an underrated player in this league, or do you think he's not underrated and he's just more of a shooter? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.